All right, and welcome back again to the Paisan Sports Podcast. Dante DePlasto, joined as always by Zach Deal of What's the Deal Sports. So I gotta ask, what's the deal with Philly always getting all these meme athletes? It started with Nick Castellanos. Then you get Nico Batum. Fourth quarter, why yelling why the fuck Batum in? You get Jared McCain, the zesty boy. Now who else do you bring in? Eric Gordon. What did Eric Gordon do? 2K. It was raining threes. Bam, bam, bam. Who else? Who else do we have? Kelly Oubre. He's a meme. Just because all the women love him. That's a big meme in the realm of Philly sports.
You
What
might be
is
blowing
going
your
on?
gasket already. We're a minute into the podcast. You're already losing a little bit of volume in your voice. But would you say meme or mean? Because I thought you said
Meme.
mean first, and then I realized that you said meme.
Meme. I feel like all the meme-worthy NBA, like ever since Castellanos went to the Phillies, him being obviously the biggest meme-worthy player in the MLB. You can even argue Bryce Harper is another meme-worthy guy, just because not really anymore, but the whole "that's a clown question, bro" thing was a big meme in the MLB world for a while. But ever since bringing Nick Castellanos, I feel like the Sixers have just racked up meme-worthy players. Nico Batum, Kelly Oubre, Jared McCain now, Eric Gordon. We had JaVale McGee at one point, but that was a while ago. And Mo Bamba. That was the other guy I want to mention, Mo Bamba. I just feel like the Sixers just get all the meme-worthy guys in the NBA.
Well, listen, the first thing that I will say, since we're going to talk about the Sixers in a little bit, I don't care what Jared McCain does. As long as he produces on the court, he can be
Yeah,
making all the TikTok. I
absolutely.
actually think it would be funnier if he was still painting his nails and doing the TikTok dances and he was one of the best players in the league. So, and I think I don't know if I would say he has the chance to be one of the best players in the league being undersized, but I actually do really
Well, he
like
can always
his
put on weight. He can always put on weight. I mean, the guy's 6'3". Let's not act like he's very short. You can always
That might be
he's
a little
undersized in
generous six
terms
foot
of
three that you're giving him. He's like more
he
6'2" ish, but
eh, but I mean, he's more undersized in terms of weight, which you can always put on more weight.
yeah, I
You
mean, at 18 or 19 years old, your body's definitely not completely formed yet, so he's got some time. I just
yeah,
hope
I'm not
the
worried
one
about that.
topic I was going to talk about with him specifically is I just hope that now with the signing of Paul George, they're able to usher in minutes for him, and he doesn't just get lost in the logjam of the players that they do have. And I think that they have the luxury now of actually being able to get him viable minutes, maybe like 20 minutes a game in the regular season off the bench, and they can play it by ear from there with the new roster additions of free agency.
Yeah, well, I will say this. You're talking about how fun it would be if he's still painting the nails and doing the TikTok dance if he's one of the best players in the league. I've thought one of the funniest things is, how Kelly Oubre's what do you call it? What do you call it? When somebody, how like when Melo would score and he would do the three to the dome, or LeBron with the
Oh,
like
signature celebration type thing.
yeah, I feel like there's a better word for it. It's just escaping my brain right now. Um, but yeah, I think it's funny how Kelly Oubre's signature celebration is him blowing a kiss. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, that is classic.
he's just this like phenomenal scorer on the court who's just cooking your team, and like he's blowing a kiss to the
Yeah, and
crowd.
it's funny because a lot of I feel like a lot of girls like say that he's their favorite player because he's like seen as a good looking dude to women. So him blowing the kiss to the crowd even like adds a little incentive to it too.
Him him being like this great scorer on the court while just being like the heartthrob of the NBA is just so funny to me.
Yeah, he's
And
classic. I
now
brought him
and now
back
you
for a
pair
very
that with Jared McCain, and I actually saw earlier someone on Twitter asked what the nickname should be for the Jared McCain Kelly Oubre duo, and the best response by far was somebody said the Zesty Besties.
That's actually really funny. I like that. Zesty is definitely a funny word. But yeah, I
Zesty
mean,
besties.
I was actually like trying to pinpoint in my brain when they drafted Jerry McCain, who they who would possibly partake in some possible TikToks with him. And I think at some point he might get the entire team on board. I mean, if
There's
he's
no shot you'll ever see JoJo doing a
you don't
TikTok.
think so, dude?
There's no shot of that.
Well,
I could
JoJo,
see
like you said, like when we're, like what we got talked about on this
Maxine.
topic is meme worthy players. Remember like early JoJo when he was first in Philadelphia and how active he was on social media and like had
Yeah,
like
they
just
were calling him Troel Embiid, and since getting older and maturing more, he's not
yeah.
really doing
But it's
that.
funny now because he like just like he's like strictly posts like he loves soccer so much and he'll strictly post about soccer and just like put like 3-word tweets about soccer that don't have any like ties to act like he won't keyword anything that would make you if you didn't know from the outside that he's talking about soccer. So like yesterday I think he said let's go with like exclamation points and everybody's thinking that he's talking about free agency before it even started, but he's really talking about soccer. So that's
Yeah,
pretty
that's happened a couple times. I think the best meme worthy thing that ever happened with Embiid, I don't know if it's meme worthy, but just when he brought out Triple H for the start of a playoff game after doing the DX chop. He brought out Triple H for that next game to ring the bell.
Bold take, but I actually hate when he does the DX chop just because I always think because I always think he's getting an automatic technical. Like if you were a ref and he does the DX chop, like you know
He
what I mean?
usually never gets a tech. He usually just gets fined for it. I don't
I know it's
recall him
interesting
actually
how
getting a tech
they
for it.
do it. I don't know how they equate that, but always just like hold my breath because I'm like, dude, like there's no reason to even celebrate. We all know how good you are, but it is funny when he does the DX shop after an and one and gets the crowd all fired up. That definitely adds some energy to the arena. But since we're already talking about the Sixers, let's just review some things that have happened in the past week because we haven't had too much Sixers content to talk about. We kind of just been talking about the same things. And now it's official. So the Sixers signed Paul George to a 4-year, $212 million deal. They also add Andre Drummond back in free agency, who played for the Sixers a couple seasons ago. And I'm pretty sure they added him in the Nets trade, right?
Wait, who they get in the next trade? Wait, what?
The Nets trade for James Harden, I'm pretty sure he was a part of that deal.
Who was?
Andre Drummond.
Oh yeah. We
Yeah.
sent them. We sent them Ben Simmons, Andre Drummond, and Seth Curry, for James Harden. So yeah, I mean Andre Drummond, he was the best backup center Embiid's ever had. With Dwight Howard, I would say being a close second. And since Andre Drummond's departure, they have had no one. I mean, they've been using Paul Reed as the backup center since then.
And you know the funniest thing about Paul Reed is he's been listed as a small forward his entire career.
Yeah, and he was a power forward. Before we lost Drummond, and they elevated him to the 5, which I don't know.
I mean, for a guy playing out of position, I mean, he's doing his best out there. He's definitely had his moments. I mean, Paul Reed's not a bad player. It's just somebody not moving forward with championship aspirations. He might be a guy that you keep on the end of your bench in case of emergency, but he's not really a guy that you're going to look to fill big spotted minutes where he was literally filling in for an injured Joel Embiid, and that was your starting lineup. And not only that, him being your starting center, they rely so much on Joel on the offense and defense end that he had to take on a huge role to try and fill that void for Joel whenever he was in there. So they added Andre Drummond back to back up Joel Embiid. And the craziest part is Andre Drummond's only about to turn 31. I mean, it's felt like he's been in the league for a really, really long time, and he's still relatively young. And what he's going to be asked to do, I actually really like that deal because I feel like there's still some youthful energy that we can pull out of him.
Yeah, and not only is he valuable as the center coming off the bench, but Embiid is going to miss games. I mean, that's just inevitable. So when you have a guy who's capable of being your starting center for a while, it's a really good move. I mean, you look at, okay, let's say Embiid at one point in the season misses a week, 2 weeks, right? Then during that time, you still have a starting 5 that features Tyrese Maxey, Kelly Oubre, Paul George, and Andre Drummond, it's still a very good starting five. So, with that's
I mean,
part.
Andre Drummond's only a couple years removed from averaging like 18 and 15.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like he stepped out of like his role as like one of the pinnacle parts to a franchise quite early in his career. I mean, he had that run in Detroit, during the 2010s, and then since then he's kind of just either been more of a role player or a backup center in the case of the 76ers, but all the talent is pretty much still there. So it's a really good move bringing
And
him
then he
back.
might be best served as this role in the NBA since, like, obviously he was holding down the Detroit Pistons franchise that really didn't have too much going on. But at this point in his career, I feel like he can still really give good minutes, and he can play a decent amount of the time. Like we said, if Joel misses time, he can easily fill in there, and he's definitely,
Yep.
like we said, young enough. I was surprised when I looked up the age when they signed him, and it was funny because I was when I first saw, because I have all the tweets coming to my phone, so I saw Woj drop Andre Drummond is planning to sign, and I knew that it was going to say the Sixers on the other end. I just knew because I just knew the Sixers were going to target a backup center, and that's something that they've been longing for quite some time now, and I just really like the deal. So they also added some other people back. They got Aaron Gordon for the vet minimum. The vet minimum being 3.3
You mean
million.
Eric Gordon?
Yeah, Eric Gordon. What did I say?
You said Aaron.
Oh, Aaron Gordon. Yeah. No, I mean Eric Gordon. They got Eric Gordon for the vet minimum, which a guy of 10 plus service in the 10 plus years of service in the NBA, 3.3 million. I'm still hoping that they maybe can get Kyle Lowry back at that number too. And they still have a little bit of money to work with, but they signed Eric Gordon, and they also brought back Kelly Oubre on a really relatively team friendly deal. Only
Yeah,
8 million per year for a guy that really performed pretty well last year. And
yeah,
it
and
could possibly be a starter too. Like you don't really see starters going for 8 million a year.
yeah, I think he should absolutely be in the starting lineup. Maybe depending on if they bring Kyle Lowry back or not. I mean, a lot of people are talking about like a starting five of like two guards and then Kelly Oubre at the three with PG at the four. But I don't really want to. I would much rather play PG at the three and bring in
Yeah.
a guy with more size like Larry
But that's
Markkinen.
also the luxury of signing Paul George is he can play 2 through 4
Yeah,
easily. And
yeah,
he also can be like kind of like he's not a point guard by any stretch of the imagination, but he can be your ball handler.
yeah, absolutely. I don't really want to see like too much of an undersized lineup. I feel like that's kind of what we were rolling with last year, and I don't really want to see more of that. But yeah, Kelly Oubre, great to have him back, especially on that sort of deal. Um, what was I? Something else I was going to say, and it completely slipped my mind. What did you say before Kelly Oubre? What did you mention before that?
No, I was just mentioning who they signed and then some of the departures so far in free agency. They obviously lost Tobias Harris, who got
Wait,
to
yeah,
Detroit.
wait, hold on. I remember what I was going to say now. Yeah. So you mentioned the Sixers still have some money to work with. I don't know how true this is. Yeah, I mean, in the ballpark, this is true, but I don't know how accurate the number is. Because they announced that they're extending Tyrese Maxey, but
Yeah.
they're waiting until they spend their money to then extend him so that they, you know what I mean? Because obviously, you can bring
Yeah,
back.
you can exceed that limit because you have
Yeah,
the rights to Tyrese
yeah.
Maxey.
So rather than extend him now and then be out of money, they're gonna make all their moves and then extend him, right? So someone on Twitter, like I said, I don't know how accurate this number is, but someone said they now have 15 million to play with. I heard someone else mention 18 million, so somewhere in that ballpark, I guess. Because that's how much. So Larry Markkinen is making 18 million per year if we try and trade for him. I heard
And we're seen as one of the two front runners. Golden State is also trying to trade for him. And I was going to bring this up in a little bit, but since you already mentioned it, we can talk about it now. Golden State and the Sixers are like the two front runners to land Lauri Markkanen via trade. The Sixers have some draft assets that they can give up, as in draft picks and
we have
maybe
no players to trade though.
yeah, that's the thing that I'm
No
saying.
players.
I don't think the Warriors would trade Jonathan Kuminga for Lauri Markkanen. That doesn't really make sense, especially losing Klay Thompson today to the Dallas Mavericks. But maybe like a Moses Moody and some draft picks could push the needle for the Jazz. Moses Moody was a lottery pick a few years ago that really hasn't gotten his time or any time to shine. Maybe that might change since Klay's not there anymore. But the Golden State Warriors, they were also in pursuit of Paul George via sign and trade, but when he didn't opt into his contract, that kind of derailed things, and there was mutual interest there. I'm not sure if Paul George was more interested in joining the Golden State Warriors or the Sixers, but it kind of looks like he was more interested in the Sixers just based off of him not opting into the contract to make that even possible for that trade to go down.
Yeah. Yeah, and Golden State, they were also listed as the other favorites, like us and them to land Paul George, and now we're both favorites to trade for Lauri Markkanen. So who knows, maybe we'll come out on top again this time. I don't really know what ended up happening though, because I did see a report like last night that the only two teams with enough cap space to sign Paul George was us and the Pistons. So I'm not really sure.
Yeah, the Magic were also interested in that, but they signed KCP really early in the free agency.
Yeah.
So $22 million per year. I like KCP a lot. He's definitely a championship level player. He's won 2 rings, one in Los Angeles and one with the Denver Nuggets. He's a really good player. But for the people that are upset about the Paul George trade and just looking at the money and just like a lot of people have just been saying, oh, they're always going to be hurt. This doesn't make them as good as Boston. Like, what else did you want the Sixers to do? This was the best possible move that the Sixers can make.
Yeah.
And it was like a rumor that kind of just came to fruition. It was almost like the Sixers the entire time were known that they were going to be able to get Paul George. You didn't have to give up trade assets or give up anything to get him. It just cost money. So I really don't understand what all the why people are so upset with this signing when I mean, even last year, I think on the podcast when we talked about it when they lost to the Celtics, we were talking about how to improve this roster and a possible James Harden trade. And James Harden could have been traded for Paul George, but he might not have re-signed if he was on the team for 1 year. You know what I mean? So you never know what was going to happen, and you would have had to trade for him. So at the end of the day, they pretty much got some draft picks from the Clippers in that James Harden trade. So signing Paul George now, and with the hindsight of it all, it actually worked out for the best that the Sixers just got what they got in the James Harden trade, and then we're just able to sign Paul George in free agency.
Yeah. Listen, like it's not a move that I'm super thrilled about. I'm not like, oh, we got Paul George, we have a good chance to win the finals now or anything like that. But it was the best option. I mean, Paul George, in a relatively weak draft class, Paul George was the best free agent. I mean, not draft class, free agent class. Also a super weak draft class, but in a relatively weak free agent class, Paul George was the best free agent available, and we got him. And this is an offseason where you had to get somebody. You have the cap space. Embiid doesn't have many years left in this prime. You have to go out and get the best guy available. And that's what the Sixers did. So it's not anything to be upset about, in my opinion. It's kind of just like, I wish there was a better free agent, a younger free agent available. I saw some idiot Knicks fan on Twitter saying that OG Anunoby was a better option in the free.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They were interested in OG Anunoby. They could have spent $40+ million on him. They could have signed KCP to over $20+ million a year. You're coming off the Tobias Harris contract, who he just got $26 million. There was no chance he was ever going to get re-signed. But coming off that contract and then being able to flip it into Paul George, even though it's double what Tobias Harris is making now, I'll take that every single day of the week for a top 20 player in the NBA. And if you look at the fit-wise, they have a player at each level, and they just got the most premium position of a guy. I feel like a lot of people would feel a lot different about this move if Paul George wasn't 34 years old.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the main reason to not be thrilled about the move. I mean, you have him signed until he's 38 years old. Um, he's relatively injury prone now in his older age. Granted, he did play 74 games this past season. Actually, he had his two best shooting splits of his entire career. He shot 47% from the floor, which is the best in his career. And he shot, I think, 41% from three, which I think was also the best 3-point shooting percentage in his career. So, and he still averaged 22 points per game. So, I mean, and he's a great defender. So he's still a top tier player. It's just due to him being 34 and his injury history in the past, is he an injury risk this season? And how bad is this contract going to look towards the end of it? Those are the main worries. If he was
I
young,
think we would agree on, what would you say? It's probably like a 3-year window with Paul George now.
2
Signed
year.
to a 4-year deal. You
I'm,
would say
I'm
2?
gonna I'm gonna say a 2 year. Also, considering Joel Embiid as well. I mean, actually, I don't know. Everybody's always keeps saying, "Oh, Embiid has like 1 to 3 years left in his prime." Blah 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 blah. But I mean, other than injury, he's really shown no signs of progressing. I think it's more so just assumptions with Embiid's injury history that he's not going to last well into his 30s, which I guess it's a decent assumption, but he hasn't really shown. And I mean, if anything, he's continued to progress every year, even
That's
this
what I'm
late.
saying. He's only getting better when he's on the court. I mean, he might not be
Yeah.
on the court as much as everybody would like him to, but I mean, he's up in his points per game. I mean, he's
Yeah,
still
I mean, he
playing at
averaged
a level.
36 points per game this past
Yeah, it was
season.
like 35. It was right in that ballpark. So, I mean,
Yeah.
how dominant he was. He had the 70-point game. I mean, when he's on the court, and it just, it's just freak accidents and being that big size. He's not the only one that deals with injuries. I mean,
Yeah.
look at the entire league. Every team deals with injuries. I mean, whether it's another big man with Anthony Davis always being injured. I mean, everybody deals with injuries. I mean, Joel just deals with a lot, and I feel like it's under a bigger spectacle because of how good of a player that he is. Like, everybody wants him, wants to say that he's a top 3 player in the NBA, but the only thing holding him back is his injury proneness. So, but if we're looking at during the Joel Embiid era, because he's been through this entire timeline of all these different players that they try to match him up with, do you think this might be the best team that Joel Embiid's possibly going to be on in his career?
If they land Larry Markkinen, then 1,000%. Yeah. I think this squad right now is really up there. I mean, the 2018-2019 on paper, that was one hell of a roster with Ben Simmons, JJ Redick, Jimmy Butler, and a prime Tobias Harris, as ridiculous as it sounds now. But at the time they brought Tobias Harris over from the Clippers, he was averaging 19 points per game, shooting over 40% from three, having a hell of a season. So I think it's up there close to that. Depends on how good Paul George is this season. But I mean, you look at Tyrese Maxey, he averaged 26 points per game last year. He's really starting to come along as a threat with the ball in his hands. So yeah, I mean, this is a hell of a squad Embiid's getting paired with. I think also it depends on how they fill out the rest of this roster. I think as of right now, they have 7 guys on the roster.
Yeah.
So they still have a lot of holes to fill, and it kind of depends on how they structure the rest of it. But as it stands right now, this is one heck of a roster for Embiid to work with.
Yeah, one of the guys that I was a little upset that they lost in free agency was D'Anthony Melton, but him getting 12 million per year, and that happened right after Klay Thompson decided he was going to go to the Dallas Mavericks. That Golden State pretty much swooped in and made that deal. So I was a little upset about that, and they traded a first-round pick a couple years ago to grab him, but he's also somebody that wasn't on the court all the time, and especially this past season. I feel like if he would have played this past season and his back wasn't nagging and just kept, getting re-injured the entire season, maybe he would still be a Sixer. But I mean, you can't have it all. So I'll take Kelly Oubre for $8 million a year as opposed to D'Anthony Melton for $12 million a year and being able to obviously sign Paul George. They also lost Nicholas Batum, who they got in the Clippers trade.
He's the one I'm more upset about. I'm more upset about losing Nico Batum than D'Anthony
But he's
Melton.
old. I like Nico Batum. You could have signed him to a decent deal.
Yeah, but this team is if they bring back some of the other guys, this team is already very guard heavy. Like they could still possibly bring back Kyle Lowry, bring back Buddy Hield. I don't know how much of a need there really was for bringing back D'Anthony Melton. And that's another guy I want to talk about. I really hope after spending the rest of the money they have now, obviously they'll get a mid-level exception, and I would love to see them use that on Buddy Hield and bring him back again.
Yeah, I would like to see Buddy Hield back. I think that would be a nice volume scorer to keep things at ease in case of any injuries arise, and then you still have some offensive production in there. But, I mean, can this roster really work with what they have now and what they've already spent? Is it really a necessity to bring Buddy Hield back? Because, I mean, Kelly Oubre showed that he is able to be not only a really good offensive player at times, but also he is willing to take on the defensive assignment of guarding the ball on defense. So that takes a little bit of pressure off Paul George, who's known as a really good defender. But I mean, Kelly Oubre can really light it up. I mean, almost.
Yeah, I consider Kelly Oubre. I consider Kelly Oubre to be part of the starting lineup. I mean, of course, you need somebody off the bench like Buddy Hield. You need somebody to come off the bench that you can really count on. That's a necessity in today's game, and I think Buddy Hield is that guy, and I would love to see them bring him back.
Well, it's just going to be interesting to see what they do with Jared McCain, because I feel like Jared McCain, there's not too many guys that have like lottery type potential. Like he could have easily been drafted in the lottery, and they're going to be coming into a situation where they're not expected to start and they're not expected to be the best player on their team. Like a lot of these lottery teams are drafting these guys and expecting them to be good right away. So, I mean, maybe as the season progresses, Jared McCain can be a reliable guy off the bench that could add a little bit of added scoring. I mean, we're talking about a guy that can really light it up on the offensive end.
Yeah. I mean, but that's the thing. I mean, you can't go into the season looking at the roster you have in front of you and counting on a rookie to provide what you need. I mean,
that's why I'm talking about also bringing back Kyle Lowry, because I feel like that takes a lot of pressure off of Jared McCain and what the expectations may be. And it's a really good mentor for a guy that might be a little bit undersized in the NBA to see how things work and see how he can navigate his game and, be able to make an impact on the NBA level.
Yeah, I think two guys, I mean, that I would like to see bring back are Kyle Lowry and Buddy Hield. Kyle Lowry at his age, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't bring him back. But
I mean, if we're talking for the vet minimum, $3.3 million, what they signed Eric Gordon to, who we haven't really talked about too much because Eric Gordon's still in the fold, a guy that can at times get really hot from deep and, add some scoring punch too. So maybe they will go to the route. They have a lot of guys that can score now. So maybe they go more towards the route of trying to get defenders. And that's what Kyle Lowry is. That's the type of prototype that he is. So especially now, I mean, Kyle Lowry had games where he also laid a goose egg next to Tobias Harris's, but we're talking about the goose egg between him and Tobias Harris. He's doing way much more on the court than Tobias Harris was. Laying his goose egg. So, I mean, it's not the most ideal situation.
It's not hard to do more than what Tobias Harris did, unless you want to miss more rebound follow-ups after the rebound. Why am I struggling?
I really can't believe that he got $26 million per. I don't think there's another team in the league that would have offered him that besides the Detroit Pistons, who just have a lot of money to deal with. And I mean, it's really not that bad of a contract when you think about it being 2 years. So it's like they can get out of it, and then once he gets out of that contract, I don't see him sniffing a contract anywhere near the past two contracts. So put his agent in the Hall of Fame, because the money that he's stealing from the NBA is just crazy.
Well, before we talk any more about that, it's time for my Meatball of the Week. And my Meatball of the Week is the Detroit Pistons for giving Tobias Harris a 2-year, $53 million contract. Have they not seen how bad he's been? And not only that, they're a young rebuilding team. What are they doing spending $53 million on a washed up power forward who can't play anymore? He's awful. The move makes absolutely no sense. If anything, maybe it takes some of the pressure off the young guys they're trying to develop. I really don't know. I don't see the reasoning for it. I think they just thought, hey, we have a lot of money to spend. Let's just bring back Tobias Harris. Maybe he can be as good as he was last time he was here, even though that was like 10 years ago. I really don't know. I can't justify it. The Detroit Pistons, you're my meatball of the week.
That's one of the better meatball of the weeks that we've had. But real quickly, before we segue into some Phillies talk, we got to talk about the draft. We've been talking about Jared McCain for a couple segments, but they also in the second round were able to land UCLA big man Adim Bona, and a guy that could possibly venture into. He's a little bit undersized at his position, being 6'8", but maybe he ventures into being a viable backup, and he can learn from Andre Drummond and Joel Embiid. So that might be more incentive to be able to get rid of Paul Reed because you have a third big man that can fill in at times. And he's going to be a rookie, but he was for his conference in college, he was the defensive player of the year. So that's always a good thing. We've had some players like that in the past, like the Zaire Smiths of the world and Matisse Thybulle with those type of accolades that may have not worked out. But this is just a flyer in the second round, and I kind of like this prospect.
Yeah, I mean, as far as second round picks go, I think it's a good pick. Who knows if he'll actually end up being a good NBA player or not, but most second round picks don't end up being good NBA players. So
He said he also models his game after Ben Wallace. So if he's modeling his game after Ben Wallace, I'll take a defensive
Ben Wallace
of the week.
was undrafted. You know what I'm saying? Ben Wallace was undrafted. So and he was also undersized as well. I think Ben Wallace might have also been 6'8", maybe he was 6'9".
So that's
But
why he's saying all that. It all matches up to each other.
Yeah, so I mean, hey, if this guy can turn into the next Ben Wallace, that would certainly be nice. After Drummond's contract is up, you have Ben Wallace Light as your backup center. That'd be sick. I'd be all for that.
Yeah, I want to be opposed to that at all. But let's segue into some Phillies talk. I mean, it wasn't the greatest week. This might honestly be besides the beginning of the season, this might be the singular worst week of Phillies baseball in quite some time.
Well, and you know what? It wasn't even that bad. I think that just shows.
Well, I mean, it was pretty dramatic, I would say. I mean, the week started off with Kyle Schwarber not only going down, but Bryce Harper on the last.
Oh, well, yeah. If we're talking about injuries, then yeah.
Oh, that's
definitely.
what I'm adding.
I thought you meant like how they performed on the field. Because I don't even think they lost a series in that time span. I mean, they split with the Marlins. They came very close to losing that series. But yeah, I mean, they
probably should have. And the thing that I really liked about the win on Sunday, obviously the huge comeback, but it really felt like with Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper being hurt, you kind of felt that aura of how good of a player Trey Turner actually is start to seep out a little bit. It felt like we still had a top 10 player on a roster, and that's how it should feel. I mean, Trey Turner is making that enormous contract, and he is seen as one of the best players in the league, and he's been performing that way. But people obviously know it's Bryce's team. People even had Trey Turner as ranked as a better player than Bryce Harper. I still would take Bryce slightly over Trey Turner, but Trey Turner is still one of the premium players in all of baseball. And it really felt like Sunday just showed that, yeah, we might be out with some key starters and we keep getting injured. And we have three of our most important players injured right now, but we still have one of the best players in the league on our team, and he's able to will us to a comeback.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, he came off the injury batting, I think 342, from a small
like 338 range or like 342 somewhere around there.
Yeah, at the start of the season. So, I mean, it was a small sample size. He was batting about 342. Comes back, I think most people, myself included, are assuming like, all right, he's have a high batting average, but once he starts playing again, that's gonna come back down to earth. But he's still batting above 330 ever since coming back. I mean, He hasn't really shown a lot of power since coming back. I think he's only hit one home run, but he's just been a hitting machine. It seems like having a two-hit game, a multi-hit game, is kind of it just comes at
It
ease
seems
for
like
him.
every game he's at least going 2 for 5, which is going to keep his
Yeah.
batting average floating around. I mean, that's 400, but it keeps his batting average up. And I heard a crazy stat about him on the broadcast. His like seventh inning or later RBI was like the first one for him since like 2022 or something ridiculous. So
Wait,
he doesn't
like
really,
you're saying like the first RBI he's had in the seventh inning or later since 2022?
yeah, like late 2022, but.
Huh.
I heard that on the broadcast. So he does, like you said, he hasn't had the same pop. I think we were all mesmerized at the World Baseball Classic showing of him just cranking homers left and right after he signed to us, and we thought that was going to be the new norm. But
Well, it was also because he had good home run numbers in his career,
yeah,
leading up to him signing here. And he showed a lot of pop post standing ovation last year as well.
but I'm
I
not going to fault him. I don't want him out there swinging for the fences and he's batting 270. I'd rather him slap hit
Oh,
and
yeah,
be the best base runner
absolutely.
in the entire MLB and just get on base and let the other guys do their job and bring him in. I mean, we have one of the top RBI leaders in the entire league in Alec Boehm, who's actually been playing better than the recent slumps that he's had in the past couple weeks. And you just got to rely on those guys and allow them to knock you in.
Yeah, and just to look at his home run totals in the past 3 seasons. Actually, I didn't even realize he finished with this much last year with the bad start he had to the season. But last year, 26 homers. The year before that, 21 homers. So he actually finished with more home runs than he had the year before in LA when he, had a phenomenal season batting 298, 809 OPS, but 100 RBIs. But anyhow, 26 home runs last year, 21 the year before that. And the year before that, 28 home runs, 18 with the Nationals and 10 with the Dodgers. So, I mean, he
I feel
had,
like that number is just going to fluctuate a lot. You know what I mean? I mean, we saw back in the day that MVP Jimmy Rollins season where he hit 30 home runs and then he was, mid 20s for most of his career and then just randomly jumped up to 30. You know what I mean? You just get hot and you're swinging in a different type of way. So I kind of feel like it can feel out a little bit. His contract will age a lot better if he can add more pop to his lineup, pop to his bat. But at the end of the day, like I said, I don't want him out there swinging for the fences and not getting on base. So I'm completely happy with his performance
yeah,
as.
no, I much prefer him just getting on base. You know, the way this lineup is constructed, they need a guy who just racks up base hits and runs the bases really well, considering most of the other guys in the lineup are, power hitters, the
And
likes
especially
of.
with Bryson Stott struggling the way that he is struggling.
Yeah, and speaking of players struggling and getting hot, one guy who's been hitting the ball really well lately is Nick Castellanos.
Yes, sir. Everybody's most beloved athlete in Philadelphia. I feel like people I don't know what it is about Castellanos. They like don't like they he's just the guy to blame all the time. Like the other day, he went 4 for 5, and I still see people on social media. The one time that he gets out in the entire game, they're still complaining. You know what I mean? So, and the one thing I will say about Trey is that I notice is when Trey doesn't hit the ball and doesn't get a hit, it's usually a strikeout. So that's kind of the same thing with Nick Castellanos. They kind of
Yeah,
so that
that's like
could be
the
a little
whole
bit
knock
weary.
people have on Nick Castellanos is how much he strikes out. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Trey Turner, it feels like anytime he doesn't get on base, it's a strikeout. I think I completely agree with you with Nick Castellanos. I think he is often just used as the scapegoat. He had a pretty rough start to the year this season, but last year he was pretty good last year. I mean, he batted 276, racked up a lot of RBIs, had a scorching hot start to the season, played really well in the NLDS. I think Nick Castellanos gets some unnecessary hate.
And for him to be batting over 230 now with the way that the season started, people thought that he wasn't even going to reach 200. So for him to be at 230 right now is actually a really big plus. And he's been moved all over the type of lineup. He hasn't even had time to really settle into where he's going to be in the batting lineup because of all the injuries and how they have to change the lineup constantly with these injuries. So I'm actually very pleased with Nick Castellanos' performance. And a lot of people don't think he's as important as he actually is because he also plays stellar defense nowadays. Since he's come to
Yeah,
Philadelphia, he's become a really
he
good
had
defensive player.
a mishap in the outfield yesterday. But yeah, I mean he plays very good defense. And yeah, just to look at his numbers last year. He batted 272, 29 home runs, and 106 RBIs. I mean, like that for somebody to have that good of a season, that's a very good season. So for somebody to hit that well and the fan base complains about them, I mean, that's just absolutely insane to me. I don't know like what
more can you expect? Everyone just
what do you really want out of him? He had 106 RBIs, 29 home runs, batting 272. I mean, that's a very good season. It earned him an All-Star nod.
And people just really don't understand the market of players. Like even with the Paul George signing, people just like, oh, they see the $53 million per year, but that's what the NBA is. In the MLB, Castellanos is making $20+ million a year. That's the market for a player like him in the MLB. It doesn't matter how much he's actually making. It matters what the market values him as. And that's what it is. So everybody always like the common knock on him. Oh, he's making $20+ million a year. He can't even hit a baseball. First off, he's been better in recent memory. And that's what a player like him gets paid. So, I mean, take it or
I
leave
think
it.
in all fairness, I think he got paid a little more than he should have because he was coming off, an insane career year, batting above 300, 34 homers, 100 RBIs, 939 OPS. So I think he got paid a little more than he should have maybe, but
But he also was a player that didn't have like a set defensive position, so I feel like that had to do with him bouncing around. I mean, he used to play the infield. He was trying to figure
yeah, he
out where
played a
he was
little
going
third
to play
base
defensively.
before. Yeah, in the past he played a little third base. I think he used to swap around from left field to right field, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, no, you're right in that. But yeah, I mean, look, he's he's one heck of an outfielder. I think if they didn't have Nick Castellanos, I think the offense would see a significant drop. I think he brings a lot of value to this team.
Especially at the backcourt of the lineup, too. It's not like you're asking him to bat cleanup. I mean, they have asked him to bat cleanup, but that's due to injuries. But him being in your sixth hole, I mean, I couldn't envision there being a better player that you could replace him as or
Yeah,
that you would want in your sixth hole.
yeah, that's an excellent point. Definitely. I think once this team is fully healthy again, if they ever get fully healthy again, because it feels like whenever somebody comes back, then somebody else gets hurt. But at full health, I mean, it's a heck of a lineup, 1 through 9, with not really many weak spots. I'm glad that Johan Rojas is back up in the MLB. I mean, I'm not glad, why he's back in the MLB. I'd rather Schwarber and Harper be healthy and him be in the minors, but it is good to see him back up in the
Yeah,
bigs.
I don't mind it at all, and I think it's good for him to get some MLB experience and then drop back down.
He's the best out of all the fringe guys they have for the outfield. He's the best one out of the bunch. I mean, he's better than Christian Pache. He's better than Whit Merrifield. He's better than David Dahl. I saw when they sent him down to the minors, some Phillies fans on Twitter were like, "Oh, thank God!" Like, you know what I mean? Like, do you not realize he's better than the other guys that are staying in the MLB so that he goes down to the minors? And then
Well, the
once
thing about him is I'm not too hard on him because I know he's still so young. You know what I mean? He still has so much to learn about the game
oh
and
yeah,
him being able to get experience. I don't want him to sit
he's
in the
only in
major
his second
leagues and not.
season.
I want him to just keep playing. So whether that's in the minors or the major leagues, just guarantee that he gets time to develop. So that just means as many at bats that you can possibly get him. He doesn't really need too much experience with defense because he already has a lot of experience playing high level defense. But get him as many as bats, and he's been trying to bunt the ball a little bit too. So he's adding a little bit to his game, and just the more and more that he grows, I mean, he's so young. He made
Yeah,
such an astronomical leap coming from Double A last year to the majors. I mean, he skipped Triple A. So it's not the worst thing in the world to send him
yeah,
down, and he still has
and
the
then when they
option
sent
to do
him
it.
to AAA, he was batting like above 350. I mean, he was hitting the ball really, really well in AAA.
I think it was
No,
actually like 382 or something ridiculously
it
high.
was above 400 after like the first series. I know, but another topic I know you wanted to talk about was who should play the infield with Bryce Harper out, Cody Clemens or Edmundo Sosa.
Yeah. So that's the big thing. I have kind of reasons for both sides why they both make sense. You know how much I love Edmundo Sosa is one of my favorite players on the team, and I think he's done enough this year to prove that he can be an everyday player if you want him to be. That I mean, this lineup's just so good that they don't need him to be, and he's one of the best utility guys in the MLB right now. Um, my initial thought when Bryce went down, move Boom to first and have Sosa play third, depending on how long the injury is. But the combatant part of that, or the other side to it, is Cody Clemens is a lefty bat that replaces Bryce Harper's lefty bat that you're missing, and you're missing two lefty bats with Kyle Schwarber. So um, I think Topper said that he's going to give Cody Clemens the go to play first base, and he's going to mix Sosa in like he has been mixing them in, and he still gives Bryson Stott a lot of days off too. So there's still room in the infield for Sosa to get time. But personally, I would put Boom at first base and put Sosa at third. That's what I would do. How do you feel about that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely love the idea of now getting to start Sosa, Bryson Stott, and Trey Turner all at once.
Yeah,
When
without
Trey
taking away
Turner
any
came
time from
back,
any of them.
yeah, when Trey Turner came back, the big question was, well, now what do you do with Edmundo Sosa? So, with Bryce Harper out, you have the opportunity to put Sosa back in the everyday lineup. Sosa's definitely a better hitter than Cody Clemens. He's an excellent defender. I love the idea of putting Bohm at first and Sosa at third. It also improves the defense at that hot corner over at third base. But yeah, I mean, like against right-handers, it makes sense to have that lefty bat in the lineup. I think what they're doing now is kind of, Sosa plays against lefties, Cody Clemens plays against righties, but I think, like with the majority of pitchers in the MLB being right-handed, I think it would make more sense to just use Cody Clemens, sometimes against righties and not every game against righties. Despite facing a right-handed bat, I trust Edmundo Sosa more. I trust Edmundo Sosa more against righties than I trust Cody Clemens against righties,
Yeah,
despite
agree.
Cody Clemens being a left-hander. So I would like to see Edmundo Sosa get the majority of those starts. But I also would like to see some of Cody Clemens at first base, but I would like to see more of Edmundo Sosa.
Yeah, even if they had Sosa starting and they moved Boom over to first, they would still have those days where they intermix it. And like you said, depending on the matchup that they get pitching wise, even though the Phillies do play a lot of lefties, especially when they're fully healthy, because teams are trying to slow down the top of the order with Schwarber and Bryce having those hot bats being left-handed. So they try and play the lefties with them, especially in bullpen games. But another injury front that they're on the back end of their starting rotation, Michael Mercado has assumed the fifth starter role. Does this make you concerned about like the longevity of the pitching staff throughout the season since they've been getting banged up between Spencer Turnbull and Taijuan Walker? Like, would you make a move at the trade deadline to combat that? Like, how do you feel about the current situation of the pitching staff?
I feel fine about it. I mean, we've dealt with injuries at the fifth starter position.
Yeah.
The position that won't even see the light of day come postseason.
Well, that's the biggest thing that I was going to say too, is like right now it might seem as it's not the most ideal situation, but at the end of the day, Christopher Sanchez isn't even guaranteed a spot to pitch in the playoffs. I think he's definitely going to be on the roster for the playoffs, and he might be in a long reliever role, but they're not going to might not even go four deep. Maybe in the
Yeah.
early series of the playoffs. I think they could do it in the early series, but they're really going to rely on their three aces right now. Ranger had a
Well,
tough outing on Sunday.
Christopher Sanchez is playing like an ace right
Yeah,
now.
he
I mean,
really is. He could be.
coming off a complete game shutout, only giving up 3 hits, no walks, not giving up a run since getting his contract extension. So I don't think you should say the 3 aces. You should say the 4 aces. I mean, these 4 guys are really pitching like the 4 aces of 2011. The only difference
I feel
is
like it just takes a little bit more time for that to sink in for people because they're not the star power name
well,
guys.
that's what I was just about to say. Is the only difference is they're not solidified aces like the 2011 pitchers were. But in terms of how they're performing on the field, they're pitching like them.
Well, Sanchez pitched really well last year too, and no one really just talked about it. It kind of just got swept on the rug how well
Yeah, but he
Sanchez
wasn't
pitched
this good.
last year.
He was pitching really well, but he didn't pitch
Yeah,
this
he's
good.
taking it to another level. I think everybody's taking
Um,
it to another level. Are you concerned at all with the last Ranger outing? Because I feel like you really couldn't hit his spots at all on Sunday. You allowed 6 earned.
I think it's a long season. I think we'll pick it back up. The one more thing I was going to say about the 4 aces is like a week or 2 ago, just because of how well the rotations have been this year, I was refreshing my memory on the ERAs of all members of the 4 aces, including the 2 different fifth starters, Joe Blanton and then Vance Worley. Um, Hamels, Halladay, Cliff Lee, if I'm not mistaken, all had sub 3 ERAs. One of them might have been just above 3, and then Roy Oswalt was like 3.6 or something like that. That's very similar to the current ERAs on the team. You know what I mean? You have Ranger, Sanchez, and Wheeler, who are all sub 3, with Nola sitting around 3.4, if I'm not mistaken. And then you have your 5th guy, who for a while was Taijuan Walker, who just has an insanely high ERA. Actually, not even as high as Joe Blanton's before Vance Worley took over in that 5th spot. Joe Blanton was like 5.8 that year, and then Vance Worley came up from the minors and he pitched out like a 3.1 ERA or something like that. Vance Worley pitched really well. Maybe, who knows, maybe Michael Mercado can be the Vance Worley of this rotation. I definitely think just about anybody can possibly pitch better than Taijuan Walker, which is another reason I'm not too worried about the injuries in that 5th starting rotation.
I think them giving the Sanchez the extension, like, kind of might open up a door for them to be able to move Taijuan Walker if he's healthy at the deadline and just feel good about it. Because them giving him then that extension, the only reason they signed Taijuan Walker is because they thought they were going to need him to be the 4th guy in the rotation, and he ended up fading to the 5th guy. And obviously, he hasn't pitched the best. I mean, he's not the worst in the world. He gets a lot of hate, which is very rightfully so. For sometimes the way that he pitches, it seems like it's batting practice out there. But he's not the worst pitcher in the world. But maybe there is teams that actually may be interested in him, and they can flip him and maybe open up some money or get a positional player back.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe you can somehow work him into a trade for an outfielder, which is a position that they need right now. So yeah, I would not hate to see Taijuan Walker leave. I would not hate that one bit.
And if we're talking about the Chicago White Sox, who might be the team that might be selling the most at the trade deadline, obviously Luis Robert has been tied to the Phillies for quite some time now. I've seen some mocked up trades for Garrett Crochet as well, their star ace pitcher. I'm interested to see how that plans out, because if one of those guys goes out the door, maybe both of them go out the door.
Yeah, Hey, whatever brings Luis Robert Jr. over here.
What would you be willing to part with, prospect wise, to land
Well,
Luis Robert?
well, we have talked about this before. I mentioned previously I'd rather give up Johan Rojas than Justin Crawford. So
Yeah,
that's what
I
I'd be
agree.
willing to get rid of. I would definitely be willing to get rid of Mick Abel. I feel like he's been one of our top prospects for quite some time, and he's just never really developed.
And the
I
thing
would,
about Mick Abel, real quickly, is like this would be the time to just usher him into the starting rotation. And if he's not the guy
yeah,
that's able to do it right now, I mean, what is he ever going to
yeah,
turn into? Why
exactly.
would you? You already have such a high. You're already so far ahead of the pace that people thought you were going to be on win wise, and you have a comfortable lead in the division. You're down a couple starters in the rotation. Why is he not up in the majors yet?
Because he's just not ready. He just really just has not developed in recent years. I really
And they
would
could have
not.
traded him a long while ago for probably some, a very decent return. They could that could have been a piece that they could have added in the summer for a Juan Soto type trade.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, wouldn't hate to see him go, especially when you have Andrew Painter, who you're expecting to be
Yeah.
ready off of injury next season. Which, by the way, I finally saw an Andrew Painter update the other day. First Andrew Painter update since February, which is he's throwing bullpen sessions right now. Still not going to pitch in the minors this year. It's still looking like 2025. It's such a shame he's missing 2 years from this Tommy John surgery. But
I feel like it's more of a slow play though that he is in the minors. There's no reason to risk
yeah,
it.
yeah, because he's
Even if
still
he's
very
playing at a
young.
lower level, there's no reason to risk it
He's
because
still
that
very
just
young. They
shows
still have a
that
great roster.
that just shows that he actually is a part of their plans in the future.
Yeah,
The way that they're slow
he's a
playing it.
huge part of their plans. And I think anybody saying, they would throw Andrew Painter into a deal for Luis Robert Jr. is out of their goddamn mind.
No, I'm not throwing the three guys that are off limits for me are Crawford, Aiden Miller, and Andrew Painter. You can have any other
Yeah,
prospect that you want,
I
but those
I
three guys not
absolutely
getting
agree.
traded.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think Andrew Painter has Cy Young potential, maybe even multiple Cy Young potential. He just looks like an absolute phenom. He cruised his way through the minor leagues. I think he has so much upside. So I don't want to get rid of Painter. I don't want to get rid of Aiden Miller. Um, I wouldn't like to get rid of Crawford. Um, yeah, I don't. I mean, to get Luis Robert Jr., it's like okay, you just age Justin Crawford and expedite that process. But that's why I would rather give up Johan Rojas um, than Justin Crawford, because you don't need Rojas at that point. But then you do still have somebody like Crawford.
And how much of a need do you think it actually is to add like an outfielder? Because Nick Castellanos, a lot of the reason why they needed to add an outfielder is because they didn't have a legit outfield bat that they can rely on. But with Brandon Martian back from injury, I mean, he still can't hit lefties at all, but he bats really high average versus righties. And with Nick Castellanos coming around, do you think it's actually a pressing need for them to go and make a big splash trade to go all in on this year? Or like they're still playing pretty well with the injuries that they're dealing with. As
I don't think it's like a huge need. I don't. I mean, it would be really nice, but if they went back to playing Johan Rojas every day, right? If they went back to the everyday outfield of Castellanos, Rojas, March, which I think they should do, then I mean, I really like that outfield. I mean, Johan Rojas isn't the best hitter. He's certainly been hitting the ball better than the beginning of the season. Same thing as Nick Castellanos. And more importantly, he just adds so much range and defense to center field.
Yeah,
You don't need all 9 hitters.
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, if 1 through 8 is all legit hitters who are in the all 8 of them are in the All-Star conversation this year, then why does your 9-hole hitter also have to be like a
Yeah.
legit hitter, especially considering he's playing elite defense out there? So I don't think it's a need. I don't think it's a necessity. It would be great. It would be a lot of fun. It would be cool, but I wouldn't call it a necessity.
I would do it. I would do Rojas just because Rojas for Robert and some more any prospect of those three guys that I didn't mention. Um, just because Rojas just wouldn't have a spot really in the outfield to play because you're not going to play him on one of the corner spots. You know what I mean? And Luis Roberts, a pretty good defenseman himself. But at this point, I mean, I feel like the team is fine as be if they don't make a trade. But if they do make that trade, that just puts them even more over the top. You know what I mean? And that puts
Yeah.
you in the class where you don't have to worry about the Dodgers' big three just dominating compared to what your big three can do in a playoff series.
Well, that's the thing too is uh, the Dodgers, they have a big three, but we have, great starting pitching to combat that. I don't
Yeah.
really look at how does our lineup stack up against their lineup when we're talking about facing them in the postseason. I look at how does our pitching match up against their hitting versus how does their pitching match up against our hitting. And I think our pitching staff can perform well against any starting lineup in the MLB.
Yeah, and one last thing to talk about before we get out of here, the Mets. The Mets are actually coming along. They're actually in the wild card race now, which is very interesting.
Thanks to Grimace.
Yeah. I mean, I think they were at one point since he threw out the first pitch, that one day they were like 7 or 8-0 since that time
Yeah, they
period.
started out like 7-0 since the Grimace
And
game.
their
And
offense actually looks like it's back to being that potent offense that we've seen from before. Francisco Lindor has bounced back. Pete Alonso, all that Pete Alonso trade rumors kind of have been shut down, and he is on the last year of his deal. But now that they're playing well, they might be actually buyers at the deadline instead of sellers.
what I see happening for the Mets, I think this would be like the most Mets thing ever if like riding off the high of them playing great since Grimace throws out the first pitch. I could see them bringing Grimace back out to throw out the first pitch again, like, oh, look how great we're doing thanks to Grimace. Let's bring him back out. And the crowd's all like, look, yeah, Grimace. And then Grimace throws out the first pitch, they get blown out, and then they just play like crap after that, kind of just like trying to double dip into the whole Grimace thing, and it just like completely
Trying to PR it up.
I could easily see that, dude. I think it would be so funny.
Yeah, that would be hilarious. But they have been playing well, so they're kind of nipping at the heels too a little bit. So the Phillies just have to keep pace.
They just gotta hold off until Harper gets back,
And they said right around the All-Star game. I don't know if he's going to play in the All-Star game. I don't assume that he would, and I thought that we would finally see him playing in an All-Star game for the Phillies, but that obviously got ripped away from us. But
I did see he could possibly come back July 9th or following.
I think Schwarber's going to be back sooner because his was a little bit less of an injury than Bryce played. How do you feel about, real quickly, Schwarber playing the outfield? I texted you that night. Do you think I jinxed it by texting you that he's playing left field and then he gets hurt in the
he played left field a few games before that.
I think it was like 2 total games before that game he played left field, and then this one he got tweaked backing up an error by Edmundo Sosa.
Yeah, I actually missed that. I was over at my cousin's for a barbecue. He had the game on outside, but I didn't see the Schwarber injury. I did look up and see the Harper injury. I didn't really see the Schwarber one, but I mean he'll be back soon. I think JT isn't too far behind Schwarber and Harper. As long as nobody else gets hurt before these guys come back, then we'll finally see this lineup at full health.
Well, the crazy thing is literally everybody besides Edmundo Sosa and Bryson Stott that have played like meaningful, and Castellanos, those are like the only guys that haven't gotten hurt.
Bohm got hurt at one. I don't remember Bohm.
Bohm. Yeah. But there's been like 6 guys. Marsh.
We had Turner, Marsh, Harper, Schwartz, and JT. So yeah, that's 5.
That's a lot.
There's a lot. I mean, look, thank God, knock on wood, it wasn't any like season-ending injuries or anything. Knock on wood again. I just felt like I shouldn't have even said that. But yeah, I mean, they've been fortunate to get these guys back relatively quickly. Turner was out a good bit, but Marsh wasn't out long. Schwarber's not to be out long. Neither is Harper. JT, I think, should be back relatively soon. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see this team finally back at full health again.
All right. Well, that wraps it up for episode 53 of the Paisan Sports podcast. Thank you guys for joining in to this episode, and we'll be back next week with another edition.